So before I check out the live action version of this series, I decided to go and watch the entire series. I finished it just yesterday, and honestly, this is a pretty well made series, and I remember watching some of the episodes back in the day, but now that I'm watching it for the first time properly, it's actually a pretty well written series. I think I'll just talk about the characters and what I liked and disliked about them. Let's start off with Aang. He's a pretty cool protagonist, and he isn't perfect. I mean, one of my favorite episodes with him was when he hid the map or message where Katara and Sokka's father was located at, as he feared that his friends would leave him. Aang has abandonment issues, as literally he was 12 years old. He had some friends in a temple, and imagine he went to sleep and knowing his friends were alive, he woke up and all the people he knew were gone, so he grew an attachment to these two and he didn't want them to leave him. So I remember watching that episode and feeling like it was a bit out of character for him, but sort of thinking about it more, I feel like it was very in line with Aang's character. A lot of Aang's fight moves are really slick, and I really like some of the bounciness he has when he's hopping on his hover airboard thing. It's pretty cool. Let's move on to Katara. Katara, I really do like how way before she discovered that Aang was the Avatar, she kinda acknowledged him for who he was, unlike Sokka and the rest of the tribe. Katara throughout the series has always just been standing up for Aang, convincing people that he is the best hope, and she's a real cheerleader for Aang and Aang's light of hope, and in my opinion, Aang's real true friend. But even though Katara is shown to be quite nice and caring and lovely, she ain't perfect. She got a little bit jealous when Aang was learning waterbending and she got frustrated at him. Because of how well spoken Katara is and how much of a leader she is, I forget that she's still a child or a teenager, so she's gonna feel frustrated and feel a bit jealous at times. Enough of the heroes, let's talk about the villains. Let's talk about Zuko and his uncle. Zuko is one fascinating character. He's pretty ruthless, cold and uncaring and unloving, while his uncle is such a warm-hearted, kind old man, and they're both part of the Fire Nation, which are the main villains. Zuko to me is a frustrating character because on one hand I don't like some of his actions and his choice of words and what he does, but knowing his backstory and why he's doing what he's doing because his father embarrassed and really hurt him physically and mentally, you feel bad for the dude. All he did was speak up in front of the council and it caused him to have a bad scar on his face. It was awful. I like how morally grey it shows the world of Avatar, how it's not all good people and bad people on one side or the other side. And the character that represents that the most is Jet from episode 10. Jet is the leader of some young freedom fighters who want to take out the Fire Nation, and at first you're like, yeah, these dudes are cool, they want to take out the bad guys, but these dudes, particularly Jet, has a really extreme mindset where he feels like all Fire Nation people are bad, including the civilians. You see Jet harassing an old man who belongs to the Fire Nation, and even Sokka is like, he's just an old dude, leave him alone. And he wants to take out a village that has civilians and Fire Nation people inside, which is just really extreme. But it's a really interesting and realistic view of the world, as even the people that are victims are capable of doing really horrendous things, and it's this vicious cycle of hatred that never ends. But now that I've talked about all the stuff I enjoyed with the show, let's talk about the things I didn't like. I didn't really like the main villain, who was the Admiral Zhao. He was the main foil for Aang, the leader of the Fire Nation army dude. I feel like season 1 needed to have a villain before we have the main final villain, which is going to be the Fire Lord. He's very mysterious, the Fire Lord, and I like how they haven't really revealed him. With how ruthless the Fire Lord sounds, he doesn't even sound human. He just sounds like a monster who did horrible things to Zuko. But Zhao's reasoning as to why he wants to move forward is to destroy the fishes in the northern pole so that he can take out the moon. It's a really convoluted plan, and I don't really understand why he wants to do this, because it's like what Zuko's uncle said, it's going to affect everyone including the Fire Nation, but he doesn't seem to care. He's such a strange and pretty pathetic villain. And I don't like Zuko's sister, the girl who was in the flashback who was smiling as she was watching Zuko get burnt by her father. I don't know what type of messed up child she is, but at least Zuko's uncle turned away, but she was just looking at him and smiling. I thought, man, this gal is pretty damn sick and sadistic. I don't like her immediately. immediately, and I've watched the first 2 episodes of book 2, and so far not a very likable character. Next up we got Sokka, and I'm not gonna lie dude, I didn't like this character when he first appeared. He was annoying, he was whiny, and he was really rude in my opinion. I hated how he disliked Aang to begin with, and he was so paranoid with him and whether they can trust him or not, and to just leave him. But the moment he found out that he was the Avatar, Sokka was like, oh, I like Aang, and Aang's a good guy, and I didn't like that, dude. Sokka is also pretty damn misogynistic when it comes to his views on men and women, and how he doesn't really view them equally as he views men. His misogynistic views comes into full force in episode 4 when he meets the warriors of Kyoshi, and how he starts to realize that, wow, he really needs to stop with this really horrid mindset. Now, hearing all the news about them toning down Sokka's viewpoints on men and women in the live action series doesn't sound good, as it is a big part of his character and how he grows as a dude. But I do appreciate that as the show goes on, Sokka does start to acknowledge Aang, and he treats him like a good friend. And even after Aang sort of quote unquote betrayed them by hiding the fact that he knew where his father was because he had the message, he still wanted to help Aang out. He didn't hold the grudge for too long because of all of the things he's been going through, which is pretty heartfelt. Yes, he did redeem himself towards the latter half, but man, dude, I struggled with Sokka. I really struggled with this dude. Like, he's this cowardly dude, but he talks the big talk, but he can't walk the big walk, which is very frustrating to see. Did Sokka only like Aang because he was the Avatar? When Aang was practicing firebending and he accidentally struck Katara, he got really mad at Aang and tackled him, and I'm like, dude, you can tell that Aang didn't mean it. I got a bit triggered watching that scene, seeing Sokka get so mad at Aang. To be honest with you, anytime Sokka got mad at Aang and kind of vented out and shouted at him, I got kind of triggered. Aang doesn't mean to do half the things he did, and he's just a kid. The only time I actually understood his frustration with Aang was when he hid the message about his father, but apart from that, I kind of didn't like Sokka throughout the majority of the series. He's just such a frustrating character, and I'm like, I really hope Sokka improves in book 2 and book 3, because those first few episodes, Sokka was very frustrating to watch, and I kind of had a hard time with him being on screen. I actually liked Zuko more than I liked Sokka. At least Zuko is able to be competent at most things and talk the big talk. He can actually walk the walk. But overall, this was a pretty brilliant series in my eyes. I really enjoyed every episode. There were 1 or 2 that felt like fillerish episodes, but I liked how the majority of the episodes felt like standalone episodes, but they all tied into the overarching plot and storyline of this series. It does have that anime look to it, even though it isn't an anime, and it's a refreshing show where it doesn't have to have exposition after exposition during the fight scenes, which I quite liked about this series. I thought about it, and I think I'm gonna give this show a 9.5 out of 10. And I'll give it an A+. It's still part of a longer running story, and I need to watch book 2 and 3 to finally give my full thoughts of it, but so far so good. I'm going to check out the live action right now, but tell me in the comments down below what you guys think of book 1. Like for more anime videos and all that jazz. Thanks for watching. Boy Did the View signing out.